The drops began to fall on a Tuesday in March, and Sarah Mitchell would never have imagined that the rain would change her life forever. Not because of the damage the water would cause to her house in Kingwood, a suburb north of Houston, but because of what it would reveal about the people she trusted. As the sky darkened prematurely at 3 in the afternoon, turning day into night, Sarah watched from the window of her office at First National Bank as the first gusts of wind bent the palm trees lining the avenue. The red alert on her phone vibrated for the 4th time in 2 hours. Critical flood warning, torrential rains expected in the next 72 hours, extreme risk of flash floods. If you enjoy surprising stories, hit the like button now and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any detail of what will happen when the storm really begins. Comment below. Have you ever been through a flood? What was it like? Your interaction keeps this channel alive and helps me bring more exciting stories like this one to you. She knew those alerts. She worked with numbers, with forecasts, with risk scenarios. But something in that particular warning made her stomach tighten. The National Weather Service rarely used the word catastrophic in its messages, and there it was. Flashing in red on the screen, catastrophic potential for historic flooding. Sarah picked up the phone and dialed home. Her mother, Dorothy, 73, answered on the 3rd ring with that fragile voice that always broke her daughter's heart. "Mom, did you see the news? I need you to pack a bag. I'll pick you up in an hour." On the other end of the line, Dorothy hesitated. "Sarah, dear, isn't it just rain? We've been through this before." "Not this time, Mom. This is different. Please, trust me." Sarah hung up and looked at the computer, where she had privileged access to the county's alert systems. The computer models projected between 15 and 25 inches of rain over the next 72 hours. For Houston, a city built on drained swamps with an already overburdened drainage system, that meant disaster. She thought of her husband James, who was in Dallas for an engineering conference. He wouldn't return before Thursday, and the roads would likely be impassable by then. Sarah shut down the computer and told her manager she needed to leave early. Out on the streets, traffic was already beginning to jam. People rushed to supermarkets, clearing shelves of bottled water, flashlights, and batteries. On her way to her mother's house, Sarah called James again. "Love, have you seen the forecasts?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I have. Look serious. Are you getting your mom out of there?" "I'm on my way now. We'll stay at our house. It's higher up, remember? And away from the bayou." "Good. And what about Brian?" Sarah paused. Brian, her brother, James's younger brother, who lived in a ground-floor apartment near Buffalo Bayou, right in the highest flood risk zone. Brian, who had been unemployed for 8 months, surviving on odd jobs and the family's dwindling patience. Brian, whom James always defended, even when he made questionable choices. "I'll call him now," Sarah replied, though she didn't want to. The call went to voicemail. Sarah left a direct message. "Brian, it's Sarah. You need to get out of that apartment. The flooding will be serious. Come to our house. We have plenty of room." She hung up and kept driving under rain that was now falling harder. The clouds seemed to descend from the sky, heavy and dark as molten lead. When she arrived at Dorothy's house, she found her mother sitting in the living room, staring out the window with that lost expression that had become more common in recent years. Dorothy was in the early stages of dementia, something Sarah still struggled to fully accept. "Mom, did you bring your bag?" "Bag? For what, dear?" Sarah took a deep breath. "For the house. We'll spend a few days there. Remember, we talked on the phone." Dorothy smiled vaguely. "Oh yes, of course." It took 20 minutes for Sarah to gather clothes, medications, and Dorothy's important documents. When she finally got her mother in the car and they began heading back to Kingwood, the rain had already turned into a deluge. The windshield wipers, even at maximum speed, could barely keep up. Sarah drove slowly, hands tight on the wheel, eyes fixed on the yellow lines that were beginning to vanish beneath sheets of water on the road. "It's raining a lot," Dorothy murmured from the passenger seat. "Yes, Mom, but we'll be home soon." When they arrived at the Mitchell's house, a 2-story red brick home with a generous backyard, it was nearly 6 in the evening. The rain hammered the roof with a violence that seemed to intensify by the minute. Sarah settled Dorothy in the guest room and went downstairs to check the news. All the local channels had interrupted regular programming. Meteorologists with grave expressions pointed to Doppler maps showing a red and purple mast, the signature of extremely heavy rainfall stalled over Houston with no sign of movement. "This is a rapidly developing emergency," said the KHOU meteorologist. "We already have reports of flash flooding in several areas. If you live near bayous, creeks, or low-lying areas, consider evacuating now. Don't wait until it's too late." Sarah's phone rang. It was Brian. "Sarah, you called." "Brian? Yes. You need to get out of there. Your apartment is way too close to Buffalo Bayou. When that water rises, relax. I'm on the 2nd floor. You live on the ground floor, Brian." There was a pause. "Yeah, but the building has 2 stories. I can go up if I need to." Sarah rubbed her eyes, frustration growing. "Please, come here. We have room. I'll feel better knowing you're safe." "Look, Sarah, I appreciate it, but I'm fine here. Besides, I've got a few things to take care of." "What things?" Brian, this is a real emergency. I know, but don't worry. If it gets bad, I'll head over, promise." He hung up before Sarah could insist. She stared at the phone, feeling that familiar discomfort that always followed interactions with Brian. There was something about him that never inspired trust. Not malice, necessarily, but a kind of chronic irresponsibility, an inability to take things seriously until it was too late. Night fell, though it felt as if the day had never really begun. The rain kept coming, relentless, turning into sheets of water that seemed to fall not from the sky, but from some infinite reservoir above the clouds. Sarah made a simple dinner, canned soup and sandwiches, while listening to the radio news. The first evacuations were already underway. Areas along Brays Bayou and Greens Bayou were seeing water rise rapidly. Photos were beginning to circulate on social media. Cars submerged up to the windows, water invading homes, people being rescued in inflatable boats. At 10 p.m., the power flickered, once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging the house into total darkness. Sarah lit candles and flashlights, silently grateful she had prepared. Dorothy was already asleep, helped along by the melatonin she took every night. Sarah sat in the living room, lit only by the flickering glow of candles, listening to the violent drumming of rain on the roof and the distant roar of the wind. Her phone vibrated. A message from James. "Love, the roads are closing. I won't be able to come back tomorrow. All flights canceled too. Are you okay?" Sarah typed back. "We're fine. Your mom is sleeping. House is safe. I tried to convince Brian to come, but you know your brother. He's stubborn, but he'll be fine. He always is." Sarah didn't reply. She wanted to believe that, but something about that night, maybe the sound of the rain, or the absolute darkness outside, or the way the trees groaned under the wind, made her feel that nothing would be fine. Not this time. She fell asleep on the couch, lulled by the storm's roar, not knowing that when she awoke the next morning, she would find a transformed Houston, and in the coming hours, she would make a decision that would change everything, a decision based on trust, on family obligation, and on a mistaken judgment that would cost far more than she could imagine. The rain didn't stop, and in the apartment near Buffalo Bayou, Brian Mitchell stared out the window into the darkness, his cell phone illuminating his face with a bluish glow as he typed messages to people Sarah would never know, making plans she would never approve of, preparing to seize an opportunity only a catastrophe could provide. Because Brian had learned long ago that crises created cracks, that chaos generated opportunities, and that family, in the end, was just another word for access. On Wednesday morning, Sarah woke with a sore neck from the couch and a strange silence. The rain still fell, she could hear it, but it had changed character. It was no longer the violent pounding of the night before, but something steady, persistent, inevitable, as if the sky had decided it would simply never stop. She grabbed her phone. 6:15 a.m., dozens of notifications stacked on the screen, flood alerts, messages from colleagues at the bank asking if she was safe, and a message from a number she didn't immediately recognize. When she opened it, she saw it was from Brian, but through a messaging app, not his regular number. "Sarah, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. About your mom." Sarah's heart raced. She ran to the guest room. Dorothy slept peacefully, her breathing soft and steady. Sarah returned to the living room and called Brian. "What happened? Is my mom okay?" "I know. Sorry to scare you, but we need to talk, in person. It's about her finances." "Finances, Brian? Now? We're in the middle of a catastrophic flood." "I know. That's why. Look, I was helping your mom with some things, you know, online payments, that sort of thing. She asked me for help last week, but now with this storm, no power. I'm worried some automatic payments won't go through. Hospital bills, medications, important stuff." Sarah frowned. "My mom asked you to help with payments?" "Yes. You know how forgetful she's been. She called me last week, worried she'd forgotten to pay some things. I just helped." There was something in Brian's voice that didn't sound right, but Sarah also knew Dorothy really had been forgetting more. Missed bills, missed appointments, medications taken twice or not at all. It was possible she had asked Brian for help without mentioning it to Sarah. "All right," Sarah said slowly. "But what do you need from me?" "I need access to her account to make sure the payments go through. But she doesn't remember the password. I thought you could help." Every instinct in Sarah screamed caution. Giving someone access to her mother's bank accounts, especially someone with Brian's questionable financial history, seemed insane. But then she thought of Dorothy, of her heart medications that cost nearly $1,000 a month, of the assisted living bills they were considering for the near future. If the payments didn't go through, if something was interrupted, "Brian, I don't know. This seems Sarah, I get it. Really, I do. Look, I'm trying to help. If you want, you can add your own access too. Make the payments yourself. I'm just saying that with this storm, with the power out, with all the chaos, we need to make sure these critical things are handled." Sarah walked to the window. Outside, the street was already completely flooded. It wasn't just standing water, it was moving, rushing from left to right, coming from the creek 2 blocks over. The water was dark brown, carrying branches, trash, and things she couldn't identify. A half-submerged street sign wobbled in the current. "My God," she murmured. Is it bad there? Brian asked. The street's completely underwater. Brian, where are you? Still at the apartment. The water hasn't reached here yet. I'm safe. Sarah took a deep breath. Decisions always decisions. And in the middle of chaos, with incomplete information, with fear and responsibility weighing on you, people made choices they would never make under normal circumstances. All right, she said finally. But here's what I'll do. I'll set up temporary access for you, and for me. Only to my mom's checking account, not the savings. And only for essential payments. When this storm passes, we'll sit down and organize everything properly. Deal. Thanks, Sarah. Really, you're doing the right thing. She hung up and stared at the phone. Why did that make her so uneasy? Maybe because it meant trusting Brian, and trusting Brian had always been complicated. But these were extreme circumstances, and he was family. Family took care of family, especially in crises. Sarah opened the bank app on her phone. Thankfully, she still had a weak data signal. She navigated to Dorothy's account settings and began the process of adding authorized users. It took 15 minutes, between passwords, security checks, and text confirmations. When she finished, both she and Brian had access to Dorothy's checking account, $8,400 to cover monthly expenses. But then Sarah hesitated. There was also Dorothy's savings account, $47,000 built up over decades of careful saving, meant for medical emergencies and long-term care. Sarah looked at that number on the screen, $47,000. Her mother's safety net. What would keep her independent? What would pay for quality care when dementia advanced to the point she could no longer be alone? A voice in Sarah's head whispered, "Don't give access to this. Protect that account." But another voice, louder, the voice of responsibility and fear of what could go wrong, argued, "What if there's a real emergency? What if your mom needs hospitalization during this flood? What if you can't access the account because of no power, no internet? You need a backup." Sarah added her own access to the savings account. And then, after another moment of hesitation, she would replay in her mind 1,000 times in the days to come. She added Brian too. Limited access, she justified, just for emergencies. Just until the storm passed. She sent Brian a message. "Done. You have access. Please be responsible. This is all my mom has." The reply came almost instantly. "I understand. You can trust me." Sarah set the phone aside and went to make coffee in the gas-powered coffee maker they had bought precisely for emergencies like this. While the water boiled, she turned on the battery-powered television. The news was devastating. Houston was drowning. The bayous had overflowed. Entire neighborhoods were under 3, 4, 5 feet of water. Rescue teams worked non-stop, but there were more people needing help than resources available. Dorothy appeared in the kitchen, wearing the blue robe Sarah had bought her last Christmas. "Good morning, dear. Why is it so dark? The power's out." "Mom, there's a big storm. Remember, we came here yesterday." Dorothy looked around, confused. "Is this your house?" "Yes, Mom. What a beautiful house. You always had good taste." Sarah served coffee and toast for both of them, and they sat at the kitchen table as the rain continued its relentless assault. Sarah checked her phone compulsively. The bank had sent automatic messages about branch closures. Colleagues shared photos of their flooded homes. And then, at 9:37 a.m., came the first notification that would make Sarah's world begin to unravel. Transaction alert. Transfer of $5,000 from savings account. Asterisk, 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 3,847 Dorothy Mitchell to external account. Sarah blinked, staring at the screen. $5,000. To what external account? She opened the bank app, but the data signal was unstable. The page loaded slowly, froze, tried again. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only 2 minutes, she managed to access the transaction details. Electronic transfer initiated at 9:31 a.m., recipient Chase bank account in the name of Brian Mitchell. Reason medical emergency, as discussed. The coffee in Sarah's mouth lost all flavor. Her stomach tightened into a painful knot. She called Brian immediately, but the call wouldn't go through. She tried again, and again. On the 5th attempt, he answered. "Brian, did you just transfer $5,000 from my mom's account?" There was a pause. "Sarah, I can explain, then explain. The water started rising here. Fast, I needed to get out. But my car's dead. Won't start. I had to call an emergency service to get me out, and they're charging outrageous amounts because it's a risk situation. 5,000 seemed like a lot, but it was that or stay stuck here with the water rising." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process. "You couldn't have called me first." "I tried, but calls aren't going through properly, and I had to act fast. The water's almost at the door, Sarah. I panic with this kind of thing. You know that?" She wanted to believe him, she really did. But $5,000 for a rescue service, that didn't make sense. Official services were free. Even private ones wouldn't charge that much. "Where are you going?" "To a hotel on higher ground, away from the flood zones. As soon as I get there, I'll send you the location." "Brian, I swear, if you..." "Sarah, it's me, James's brother. Do you really think I'd steal from my own family?" The call dropped before she could respond. Sarah tried calling back, but now she couldn't even connect. The signal fluctuated between one bar and none. She looked at Dorothy, who ate toast, oblivious to it all, and felt tears of frustration burn her eyes. $5,000 gone, and she had given him the key to do exactly that. Outside, the water kept rising, and in Dorothy Mitchell's bank account, protected by passwords and security checks that now meant absolutely nothing, $42,000 remained. Waiting as an irresistible temptation for a man Sarah was beginning to realize she had never truly known. The storm outside was destroying Houston, but the storm inside the Mitchell family was just beginning. The water on Sarah's street had risen 4 inches since morning. She knew because she had placed a tape mark on the porch column at 7 a.m. And now, at noon, the brown line of muddy water was well above it. 4 inches in 5 hours. If it kept up at this pace, the water would reach the front door by nightfall. The Mitchells' house sat on relatively high ground in Kingwood. One of the reasons they had chosen that property 8 years earlier, but relatively high in Houston only meant you drowned a little more slowly than your neighbors. Sarah was sitting on the top step of the indoor staircase, staring at her phone as if the intensity of her gaze could make the signal improve. She had tried calling Brian 17 times in the past 2 hours. 17 calls that dropped, failed, or went straight to voicemail. She sent text messages that showed only a single checkmark sent but not delivered. The bank app opened intermittently, loading pages halfway before freezing, showing her fragments of information that were worse than no information at all. Dorothy was asleep again on the living room couch, covered with a light blanket. The morning medication made her drowsy, and Sarah was grateful for that. It was better for her mother to sleep through the chaos than to become agitated and confused. Through the window, Sarah saw neighbors across the street filling sandbags, a task that seemed pathetic and useless in the face of the volume of water already covering their lawn. The Chen family father, mother, and 2 teenage children worked in coordinated silence, moving with the determination of people who knew it was probably too late but refused to give up. Sarah's phone finally managed to load the full bank page. She navigated to Dorothy's savings account and felt her stomach drop again. 2 additional withdrawals, one for $3,000 at 10:47 a.m., another for $2,500 at 11:23 a.m. Total withdrawn since morning, $10,500. More than a fifth of Dorothy's savings had vanished in less than 3 hours. Sarah tried to block the card through the app, but the page returned an error, unable to process request at this time. Please try again later. She called the bank's fraud line, but all she got was a recording stating that due to the exceptionally high volume of calls related to the weather emergency, wait times were over 2 hours. She left the phone in the queue anyway, on speaker, listening to the irritating instrumental music interspersed with messages about financial security. Irony abounded. At 12:43 p.m., her phone rang. It wasn't Brian, it was James. "Love, how are you two doing?" His voice was tense, worried. "The water's rising. Not fast enough for us to be evacuated immediately, but rising, and we've got a much bigger problem." Sarah told him about Brian, about the transfers, about the $10,500 that had evaporated from Dorothy's account. The silence on the other end lasted long seconds. When James finally spoke, his voice carried something Sarah rarely heard: genuine anger. "He wouldn't do that. Not my brother. James, I'm looking at the transactions right now. There must be an explanation. Brian is irresponsible, I know, but he's not a thief. Then why won't he answer my calls? Why does he keep withdrawing money? Maybe his phone died. Maybe he's really in danger and had to use the money for Lua." "For what, James? $10,000 in 3 hours?" She heard James breathing heavily. "I'll try to reach him. My phone has more signal than yours. As soon as I get through, I'll call you back." "James, we need to block that account." "I know, but let's figure out what's going on first. It could be a misunderstanding." Sarah wanted to scream that there was no possible misunderstanding, when money simply disappeared from a bank account. But James had already hung up. She stared at the phone, feeling completely powerless. 40 minutes later, he called back. "I got through to him, and he says he's safe. Managed to get out of the apartment before the water rose too much. He's at a hotel near the Galleria. And the money? He said it was emergency expenses. The rescue? The hotel charging outrageous prices? Food? Supplies? He'll pay it all back when the storm passes." "James, do you believe that?" Another pause. "I want to believe, but do you?" I don't know. Sarah, I don't know what to believe anymore. We need to block that account now." "I agree. Do it. And when this is all over, I'm going to have a very serious talk with my brother." But blocking the account proved impossible. The app kept returning errors. The bank's fraud line still had an estimated wait time of over 90 minutes. And the only First National Bank branch that still had an employee handling emergencies was in Bel Air, on the other side of the city, an area completely inaccessible with the flooding. Sarah was trapped in her own home, trapped unable to protect her mother's money, trapped watching as her brother-in-law systematically drained the account. At 2:15 p.m., Another notification. Another $4,000 transferred. Total now $14,500. Sarah felt something break inside her. It wasn't just anger. It was a toxic mixture of betrayal, helplessness, and fear. Fear of what Brian would do next. Fear that when her mother woke up, she would have nothing left. Fear that she, Sarah, had been naive enough to allow this to happen. She walked to the front window. The water was now definitely above the curb, flowing quickly from left to right like a river where a street used to be. An abandoned car, a silver Honda Civic, was partially submerged 3 houses down. The current was strong enough to make the car sway slightly. Sarah saw something floating in the water that at first looked like an animal, then realized it was just a large trash bag, swollen and grotesque. Radio news reported that more than 30,000 people had already been displaced. Emergency shelters were reaching maximum capacity. The National Guard was being mobilized. The governor had declared a disaster for 16 counties. And somewhere in that flooded Houston, Brian Mitchell was in a hoteler, was he? Spending money that wasn't his while his sister-in-law watched helplessly. Sarah's phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered immediately. Hello, Sarah Mitchell, a female voice, professional. Yes, this is Amanda Rodriguez from the fraud department at First National Bank. I saw you've been on hold for almost 2 hours, and that there's suspicious activity on Dorothy Mitchell's account. I can help you. Sarah nearly cried with relief. Yes, please. My brother-in-law has access to my mother's account and is making unauthorized transfers. It's already over $14,000. I understand. Are you the account holder? No, my mother is, but she has dementia, and I have power of attorney. I'll need to verify some information. 5 minutes of security questions followed. Birth dates, last transactions, previous addresses. Sarah answered everything mechanically, her hands trembling as she held the phone. Okay, Mrs. Mitchell, I can see the transactions here. Authorized user Brian Mitchell initiated 6 electronic transfers since 9:31 this morning. You're saying these transfers were not authorized? Correct? I gave him access only for essential bill payments during the emergency, not to transfer money to his personal account. I understand. Unfortunately, since he is an authorized user on the account, technically he is permitted to make these transactions. From the bank's standpoint, it isn't fraud if the person has legitimate authorization. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. What? But I didn't authorize these specific transactions. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Mitchell, but when you add someone as an authorized user, you're giving that person full access to the account. It's like giving them a key to your house. You can't later say they broke in when they used the key you gave them, so there's nothing you can do. Amanda hesitated. I can remove his access right now, which will prevent future transactions. But as for the money already transferred, that would be a civil matter between you and him. The bank can't reverse the transactions because they weren't technically fraudulent. Please, remove his access immediately. Doing that now. 1 moment. Sarah heard typing on the other end. The seconds dragged like hours. Dorothy stood on the couch, mumbling something unintelligible in her sleep. Done, Amanda finally said. Brian Mitchell no longer has access to the account. I'll also add an alert note so that no new user can be added without in-person verification and documentation. Is there anything else I can help with? The money? Is there any way to recover the money? As I said, that would have to be resolved directly with him or through legal action. I'm sorry. I know it's not the answer you wanted to hear. Sarah thanked her and hung up, feeling utterly defeated. She checked the account again. Another transfer had been processed while she was on the phone with Amanda. $3,500. Total now $18,000. More than a third of Dorothy's savings, gone. But at least it was stopped now. At least Brian couldn't continue. Except that at 3:47 p.m., another notification arrived. Another $5,000 transferred. Sarah called the bank back immediately, but landed in the hold queue again. She screamed in frustration, a sound that woke Dorothy on the couch. Sarah, honey, are you okay? Sarah forced a smile, wiping away tears she hadn't realized had started falling. I'm fine, Mom. Go back to sleep. But Dorothy was awake now, looking around in confusion. Why is it so dark? What time is it? The power's out. There's a storm. Oh, Dorothy looked out the window, seeing the water in the street. A lot of water? Yes, Mom. A lot of water. I need to use the bathroom. Sarah helped her mother up and guided her to the downstairs bathroom. While waiting outside, she checked her phone again. James had sent a message. Talk to Brian again. He says he hasn't made any more transactions since we spoke. Says you must be seeing old transactions being processed. Sarah typed furiously back. He's lying. He just transferred another $5,000. Total is now $23,000. James, $23,000. The reply took 3 minutes. I'll call him now. Dorothy came out of the bathroom and Sarah helped her back to the couch. Her mother seemed more alert now, her eyes scanning the room as if trying to locate something. Honey, have you seen my purse? It's in the guest room. Mom, why? I need my checkbook. I have bills to pay. Sarah's heart clenched. Don't worry about that now, Mom. Everything's paid. Are you sure? I feel like I'm forgetting something important. I'm sure. Just rest. But Dorothy was restless now, fidgeting with her hands, looking around. Where's Fred? Fred was Dorothy's husband, Sarah's father. He had died 7 years ago of a heart attack. But to Dorothy, in her moments of confusion, he was still alive, still out there somewhere. Dad's not here right now, Mom, but where did he go? He should be home with this storm. Sarah knelt by the couch, holding her mother's hands. Mom, Dad passed away. Several years ago, remember? Dorothy looked at her with empty eyes, then filled with sudden, devastating sorrow, as if she were hearing the news for the first time. Fred died when several years ago, Mom. I'm sorry. Tears began streaming down Dorothy's wrinkled face. Nobody told me. Why didn't anyone tell me? We did, Mom, but sometimes you forget. I wouldn't forget something like that. My Fred, her voice broke into sobs. Sarah held her mother as she wept for her husband's death, as if it had happened yesterday, not years ago. It was one of dementia's cruelties, the grief renewed, fresh and cutting, every time the memory failed and then returned. Sarah had been through it dozens of times, but it never got easier, especially not now, when she herself was on the verge of breaking down. At 4:30 p.m., James called back. His voice was different, smaller, broken. Sarah, I talked to Brian and he admitted it. He took the money. Sarah closed her eyes. Part of her had hoped against all odds that there was an explanation, a misunderstanding, something other than the obvious betrayal. But there wasn't. Why? She asked, though she already knew there would be no satisfying answer. He said he had debts. People coming after him. Dangerous people. He saw the storm as an opportunity, with everything in chaos, and thought he could borrow and pay it back before anyone noticed. Borrow James. That's not borrowing. That's stealing. I know. I'm speechless. Sarah, he's my brother. But what he did, how much did he take in total? He said $23,000. Where is he now? Really? At a hotel? James paused too long. He's not in Houston. Sarah felt something icy run down her spine. What do you mean? He caught a bus this morning. Before the water really rose, said he was heading to San Antonio, but I don't know if that's true. He could be anywhere now. He planned this. Looks like it. Sarah pressed her fingers against her temples, feeling a throbbing headache. What do we do now? I'll come there as soon as the roads open. I promise. We'll go after him. We'll get the money back. James. He took more than half of my mother's savings. That money is for her care, for when she can't live alone anymore. Without it? I know. We'll figure it out. Somehow? But Sarah knew there was no guarantee of figuring it out. She knew that even if they found Brian, even if he admitted everything, recovering $23,000 from someone who had probably already spent or hidden, it would be nearly impossible. And in the meantime, Dorothy would grow older, dementia would advance, and the care she needed would cost more than Sarah and James could easily afford. I need to go, Sarah said. The water's rising. I love you. You'll be okay. But Sarah wasn't sure they would. Not anymore. She spent the next hour moving things from downstairs to upstairs. Framed photos, important documents, electronics, anything of value that could be damaged if the water came in. Dorothy helped, carrying random objects and hauling them upstairs, sometimes making 3 trips with the same item, forgetting she had already moved it. By 6 o'clock, the water had reached the first step of the front porch. Sarah stood at the door, watching. The Chens had been evacuated by a National Guard boat an hour earlier. Their house had water up to the first-floor windows. Other houses on the street were equally submerged. The neighborhood Sarah knew, where she had walked the dog, where kids rode bikes, where neighbors greeted each other on Saturday mornings, had turned into a thick brown river flowing inexorably toward, somewhere lower, and somewhere outside that drowned Houston, Brian Mitchell was free, with $23,000 that wasn't his, with no storm chasing him but the one he had created himself. Sarah checked her phone one last time before the battery became critically low. 31%. She needed to conserve power. But before switching to airplane mode, she saw one last message from Brian, sent at 5:53 p.m. Sarah, sorry. I know you'll never forgive me, but I was desperate. I'll try to pay it back. I promise. She looked at those words, as empty as her mother's bank account. Promises from a man who had waited for a natural disaster to steal from an elderly woman with dementia. What kind of person did that? What kind of person waited until the world was in absolute chaos to prey on the most vulnerable? Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she took a photo of the flooded street, of the brown water rising on her lawn, of the submerged houses around. Then, she took a screenshot of the bank transactions, all those transfers, one after another, draining the account systematically. One day, she thought, when this was all over, there would be consequences, there would be justice, or at least there would be truth. But for now, there was only the rising water, the falling night, and the sound of rain that seemed like it would never, ever stop. Wednesday night brought an absolute darkness Sarah had never experienced before. It wasn't just the absence of electricity, but something deeper, a darkness that seemed to come from the storm itself, thick and suffocating, as if the sky had decided to swallow everything. Sarah sat at the top of the staircase, illuminating the hallway with an LED flashlight that was beginning to weaken. She estimated she had maybe 6 more hours of battery left. After that, only candles remained, and candles didn't last long. Dorothy was asleep in the guest room, finally exhausted after hours of confusion and agitation. Sarah had given her a Benadryl in addition to her usual medication. It wasn't ideal, but Dorothy needed sleep, and Sarah needed a moment of silence to process the catastrophe her life had become in less than 24 hours. $23,000. The words echoed in her mind like a painful mantra. $23,000 that had taken Dorothy decades to save, that represented years of frugal living, of clipped coupons, of vacations not taken, of small pleasures denied, all to ensure that when she grew old and needed care, she wouldn't be a burden to anyone. And now, in a single day of calculated betrayal, more than half of it had evaporated. Sarah tried to calculate how much would assisted living cost when Dorothy needed it. She had researched a few months ago, depending on the quality and level of care, between $4,000 and $6,000 per month. With the $24,000 remaining in the savings account, Dorothy would have, at most, 6 months of paid care. And after that, then it would be Sarah and James's responsibility. Could they manage it? Maybe. Would it be hard? Certainly. Was it fair that they had to bear that burden because Brian had decided his needs were more important than those of a vulnerable elderly woman? Absolutely not. Sarah's phone battery was at 22%. She had turned off all non-essential apps, lowered the brightness to the minimum, set it to extreme power-saving mode. Every call, every message, every check of the bank app consumed precious energy she might not be able to replenish for days. But she couldn't stop checking, as if staring at those numbers the $23,000 gone could somehow make them reappear. At 9:47 p.m., a new notification, but it wasn't from the bank. It was an emergency alert from the Harris County Flood Management System. Critical warning: West Fork San Jacinto River has reached historic levels. Emergency release from Lake Conroe Dam, scheduled for 2 a.m. Residents in downstream flood zones must evacuate immediately. Sarah read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. The Lake Conroe Dam was north of Houston. If they were releasing water from the dam, it meant it was at risk of catastrophic failure. Releasing the water in a controlled way was better than a total rupture of the dam, but it still meant billions of additional gallons flowing through an already overburdened system. And downstream flood areas included Kingwood. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the flood zone map on her phone. 19% battery. She zoomed in on her area. The Mitchell's house was marked in orange moderate to high flood zone. If the dam released water at 2 in the morning, that water would reach Kingwood in approximately, she tried to calculate, 3 to 4 hours. That meant by around 5 or 6 in the morning, there could be an additional surge of water coming from the north. Sarah looked out the window. Outside it was impossible to see much, but she knew the water was already on the front lawn, maybe 15 feet from the door. If more water came, she had to decide, stay and risk being trapped with water on the first floor, or evacuate now, in total darkness, with an elderly, confused mother, trying to find some shelter that still had space. Sarah went down the stairs carefully. The water had not yet entered the house, but she could hear it outside, a kind of constant liquid whisper. She walked to the front door and opened it slowly. The air was saturated with moisture and smelled of wet earth, sewage, and something organic and rotten. The water now completely covered the front lawn and was starting to lick the first step of the porch. In the faint light of her flashlight, Sarah saw it wasn't clear water, but a dark brown broth full of debris, branches, leaves, unidentifiable objects slowly floating. A white PVC pipe drifted by. A child's toy. It looked like a red plastic truck, a soaked pillow. She closed the door and leaned against it, trying to think clearly. Evacuating would mean waking Dorothy, packing her into the car, and driving, where all main routes were probably closed or dangerous. And doing it in the middle of the night, under torrential rain, with zero visibility, the risks were enormous. People died driving in floods, their cars swept away by currents that looked shallow but hid deadly force. But staying also had risks. If the water kept rising, her phone rang, making her jump. Sarah, did you see the alert about the dam? I saw. I'm trying to decide what to do. You need to get out of there. You need to go now. James, there's nowhere to go. The shelters are full, the roads are impassable, and it's completely dark. There's a school in Westlake, Houston that still has space. I just checked online. It's on high ground. You can make it there, with Dorothy, in the darkness. James, she can barely understand what's happening. Sarah, his voice was firm now, with that tone he used when he wasn't making a request, but giving a directive. If that house floods with you inside, if you're trapped on the second floor waiting for rescue, it could take days. Days without proper food, without medications, without the conditions your mother needs. You need to go now. Sarah knew he was right. She hated to admit it, hated the idea of leaving that house, where at least there was shelter and relative safety, but he was right. All right, I'll get her ready. Text me when you get there. Anything, even just an emoji, just so I know you're safe. I will. She hung up and went upstairs. In the guest room, Dorothy was awake, staring at the ceiling. Mom, we need to go. Go where? It's night. I know, but we need to leave the house. The water is rising. We're going somewhere safe. But it's dark out there. I know. But I'll be with you the whole time. Don't worry. It took 20 minutes to get Dorothy ready, change her clothes, put on waterproof shoes, gather medications, documents, some extra pieces of clothing. Sarah packed everything into 2 waterproof backpacks they had bought specifically for emergencies like this. She also grabbed extra flashlights, a portable battery charger, water bottles, and some granola bars. At 10:35 p.m., they went downstairs. Dorothy held the handrail with both hands, going down 1 step at a time, murmuring to herself, "Dark, so dark. Fred wouldn't like this." "I know, Mom, just a little more." In the garage, Sarah helped Dorothy into the passenger seat of her Honda CR-V. The car had 4-wheel drive, not perfect for driving in floods, but better than James's sedan. She placed the backpacks in the back seat, checked her phone battery against 17% and started the engine. The garage door opened slowly, revealing the night beyond. The rain had eased a little, no longer the violent downpour of the morning, but still steady and heavy. Sarah turned on the headlights and saw the water in the driveway maybe 6 inches deep. She took a deep breath and began driving forward slowly. The car entered the water with a splash, and Sarah felt the resistance immediately. The water was deeper than it looked. She kept her foot light on the accelerator, remembering the instructions she had read about driving in floods. Slow, steady, don't stop or you could stall the engine. The CR-V moved through the submerged lawn toward the street. When they reached the street itself, Sarah saw the situation was worse than she had imagined. The water was at least a foot deep, flowing quickly from left to right. The current pushed the car sideways. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to keep control. "There's too much water," Dorothy said, her voice high with fear. "I know, Mom, it's okay. We'll go slow." But it wasn't okay. The water was above the wheels now, and Sarah could feel the car struggling. The engine made a strange noise. She turned right, in the direction the GPS indicated if the GPS was correct. The school was 3 miles southwest. On higher ground, 3 miles felt like an impossible distance. They passed submerged houses, lit only by the car's headlights, dark windows like blind eyes. Porches half underwater, abandoned cars with water up to the roofs. In one house, Sarah saw flashlight beams on the 2nd floor, shadows of people moving behind the curtains. People who had chosen to stay, now trapped, waiting. She turned left onto Woodland Hills Drive, one of the main arteries. The water here was a little shallower, maybe 8 inches, but visibility was practically zero. Rain in the headlights created an impenetrable white wall. Sarah drove 20 miles per hour, her heart pounding, her hands slick with sweat on the wheel. "Where are we going?" Dorothy asked for the 3rd time. "To a school? A safe place?" "Oh, all right." They had gone maybe a mile when Sarah saw emergency lights ahead, blue and red, flashing through the rain. A police roadblock. She slowed down and stopped beside a Kingwood police cruiser. An officer approached the window, wearing a rain poncho and holding a powerful flashlight. "Ma'am, this road is closed ahead. It's impassable. I'm trying to get to Westlake Houston School. It's an emergency evacuation." The officer looked at Dorothy, then back at Sarah. "I understand, but you can't go this way. The water on the bridge over Greens Creek is 3 feet deep. We've already lost 2 cars there today. What route should I take?" He thought for a moment. "Go back. Take Hamblin Road north, then west on River Grove. It's a longer way, but it should be passable." Emphasis on should. "No guarantees tonight." "Ma'am, thank you." Sarah did as he said, turning the car around and heading back the way they had come. With every minute, she felt the phone battery drain, the numbers dropping 15%, 14, 13. Hamblin Road was higher, thank God, with water only in low spots, but it was also narrower, lined with trees bending dangerously in the wind, their branches cracking and groaning. They were maybe 200 yards from the intersection with River Grove when Dorothy suddenly screamed, "Stop! Stop the car!" Sarah instinctively hit the brakes. "Mom, what is it?" "My bag. I forgot my bag." "No, Mom, it's here. Look." Sarah pointed to Dorothy's bag at her feet. "No, my other bag, the brown one, with my important things." "What important things?" Dorothy began to get agitated, unbuckling her seatbelt. "My things. My photos of Fred, my spare wedding ring, my mom buckle, your seatbelt. Please, we have to go back. I need that bag." "Mom, we can't go back. The house could be flooding now. It's not safe." But Dorothy was in full panic now, the kind of agitation dementia sometimes caused when something triggered her. She tried to open the door. "Mom, no." Sarah quickly locked the doors. "Please, I need you to stay calm." "My bag? Fred gave me that ring. I can't lose it." Sarah didn't know what to do. She couldn't remember any brown bag. Maybe it existed, maybe it didn't. Dementia sometimes created memories of things that weren't real. But for Dorothy, in that moment, that bag was real, and losing it was unbearable. "All right, Mom, all right. I'll see what I can do. But right now, I need you to stay calm and let me drive. Can you do that for me?" Dorothy nodded, tears running down her face. "Sorry. I'm sorry. You don't have to be sorry. Let's just get to the school first." Sarah kept driving, but now with the added weight of a promise she probably couldn't keep. River Grove was surprisingly clear, high enough to have avoided the worst flooding. They made quick progress, and 15 minutes later, saw the lights of Westlake Houston School shining like a beacon in the dark. The parking lot was packed with cars, most looking like they had gone through deep water. People carried belongings inside, lit by emergency lights. Sarah parked in an open spot, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment, trembling with exhaustion and relief. "We made it, Mom. We're safe." Dorothy looked out the window at the school building. "Is this where we're staying? For now? Yes. It doesn't look comfortable." Sarah almost laughed, but held back. "It probably won't be, but it's safe. And that's what matters." They got out of the car. The rain had eased to a light drizzle now, and Sarah helped Dorothy across the parking lot. Inside, the school gym had been transformed into an emergency shelter. There were maybe 200 people there, whole families spread across mats and blankets. Red Cross volunteers moved about, offering water and food. A doctor had improvised a medical station in a corner. A volunteer approached them, a woman in her 50s wearing a Red Cross vest. "Welcome. Did you just arrive?" "Yes, we evacuated from Kingwood. Do you have space?" "We do. We'll find a spot for you. Any medical needs we should know about?" "My mother has dementia, and she needs her medications." "I understand. We'll make sure she takes everything on schedule." "This way?" The volunteer led them to a relatively quiet corner of the gym, where she placed two mats side by side. "Water and food are available at that table there. Restrooms down that hallway. If you need anything, come find me. My name's Patricia." "Thank you, Patricia." Sarah helped Dorothy settle onto one of the mats. Her mother looked completely exhausted, her eyes blank and distant. Sarah gave her water and a piece of bread she had taken from the supply table. Dorothy ate mechanically, not really tasting, staring around the gym full of strangers. "Where's Fred?" she asked suddenly. "Dad's not here." "Mom, but where is he? He should be here." "He passed away." "Mom, a few years ago." Dorothy looked at Sarah with confused eyes. "Passed away? When?" And there it was, again, that cruel cycle of remembering and forgetting, of losing her husband over and over. Sarah held her mother's hand, feeling her own tears threatening to fall. Not just for Dorothy's renewed grief, but for everything, for the possibly flooded house, the stolen money, the destroyed trust, for being stuck in a gym full of strangers while Houston drowned. "It's been a few years, Mom. I'm sorry." Dorothy began to cry quietly, and Sarah hugged her, rocking her gently as if she were the child and Dorothy the mother. Around them, other families faced their own dramas, children crying, couples arguing in low voices, elderly sitting silently contemplating losses not yet fully tallied. Sarah checked her phone. 9% battery. She sent a quick message to James. "We're safe. Westlake Houston Shelter." Then she shut the phone off completely to preserve what was left of the battery. She didn't know what time it was when she finally lay down on her own mat. Dorothy had fallen asleep, wrapped in a thin blanket provided by the Red Cross. The gym lights never went fully dark. There was always that emergency brightness, that white-blue glow that turned faces into pale masks. Sarah closed her eyes, listening to the sounds around her, breathing, occasional coughs, the distant cry of a baby, the low murmur of volunteers coordinating shifts. And beneath it all, still audible even here, the steady drumming of rain on the roof. She thought of Brian. Where would he be now? In some comfortable hotel in San Antonio? Spending the stolen money on expensive meals and maybe drinks? Or had he really been paying dangerous debts, as he told James? Either way, he was dry, safe, and free while Sarah and Dorothy slept on thin mats on a gym floor, refugees in their own city. Anger burned in her chest, but it was a powerless anger. What could she do? Call the police? Technically, Brian had authorization to access the account. She had given it herself. A lawyer would say it was a civil case, not criminal. Civil suits took time and money, often more money than the amount at stake. Sarah opened her eyes again and looked at the high ceiling of the gym. Some leaks had formed, water dripping into buckets strategically placed by custodians. Even here, in a supposedly safe emergency shelter, the water found a way in. She finally fell asleep sometime after midnight and dreamed of water rising, always rising, filling rooms and houses and whole cities, and her swimming desperately trying to find something solid to hold on to. But everything was slippery and floating and slipping from her hands. When she woke, it was morning Thursday. Gray dawn light filtered through the gym's high windows. Dorothy was still asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Sarah picked up her phone and turned it on, watching anxiously as it came back to life. 8% battery left. There were messages from James. "Thank God. Love you. Road's still closed. Can't get there yet. Talked to Brian again. He says he doesn't have the money anymore. Paid the debts." Sarah read that last message 3 times. Doesn't have the money anymore. $23,000? Gone in less than 24 hours? If he really had paid debts, that meant there were people, loan sharks, dealers, who knew who now had the money. Recovering it would be impossible. She typed back, "So the money is gone. Completely." James's reply took 10 minutes. "Looks like it. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'll do everything I can to make it up to you, I promise." "But how?" Sarah did the math quickly. They had their own savings, about $15,000 in their emergency account. They had 2 cars with loans, a mortgage, normal living expenses. They could help Dorothy, yes, but it would mean delaying their own plans, the kitchen renovation they wanted, the vacation they had started planning, the possibility of a second child they had been discussing, and more importantly, it meant Dorothy would eventually need to rely on the government, on Medicaid, on low-cost care facilities where quality varied drastically. Sarah had visited some during her research. Some were acceptable, others were. She didn't want to think about it. Patricia, the Red Cross volunteer, appeared with a tray of coffee and donuts. "Good morning, how did you sleep?" "As well as possible, considering." Sarah gratefully accepted the coffee. "Any news on when we might be able to go back home?" Patricia made a worried face. "Depends on where you live. Some areas are still completely underwater. Others are starting to drain." "Where are you from?" "Kingwood, near Greens Creek." "Ah." Patricia hesitated. "That area was hit hard. The dam released this morning added more water. It could be days before it's safe to go back." "Days?" Sarah nodded, trying to process. Days without knowing the real state of her house. Days living in this gym. Days without privacy, without comfort, with Dorothy increasingly confused and agitated. "Thank you for telling me." Patricia touched her shoulder gently. "It'll be okay. People here are resilient. We'll get through this together." After she walked away, Sarah drank her coffee weak and lukewarm, but caffeinated, and watched the gym wake up. Children ran between the mats, happy despite everything, finding adventure where adults saw only displacement. Parents prepared improvised breakfasts. Elderly people sat together, sharing stories of past storms, comparing this one to Allison in 2001, to Ike in 2008. Dorothy woke up and immediately became disoriented. "Where are we? Why are we on the floor?" Sarah explained again. The flood, the evacuation, the shelter. Dorothy listened with that vague expression that meant she heard the words, but they didn't form a coherent meaning in her mind. "I want to go home," she said finally. "I know, Mom, soon, when it's safe. But I need my things. My brown bag. We'll get everything when we go back." Except Sarah wasn't sure what they would find when they went back. The house could be intact, or it could have 3 feet of water on the first floor. Dorothy's belongings, including any brown bag that existed or didn't, could be ruined, covered in sludge and mold. The day dragged on with that strange quality of time during crises, both too long and too short, each hour stretching but the whole day passing in a blur. Sarah and Dorothy ate meals provided by the Red Cross, sandwiches for lunch, canned stew for dinner. They used the shared bathrooms, washed their faces with damp paper towels, tried to maintain some appearance of normalcy. Sarah met other people. Martha, a 50-year-old teacher whose house in Humble had been completely submerged. Tom and Lisa, a young couple with a 6-month-old baby, evacuated from a first-floor apartment. Mr. Rodriguez, an 82-year-old widower who refused to leave his dog, an elderly poodle named Princessa, so he brought them both despite the no pets rules. Everyone had a story. Each story was one of loss, fear, and uneven resilience. But none of them, Sarah noted bitterly, included being robbed by her own family while everything else was falling apart. On Thursday afternoon, the rain finally stopped. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if a heavenly faucet had been shut off. People in the gym noticed, and there was a palpable shift in mood, cautious hope replacing dulled despair. Volunteers turned on televisions for news. Meteorologists showed radar maps finally clear of red and purple. The storm system had moved east, toward Louisiana. But the rain stopping didn't mean the flooding was over. The water was still there, billions of gallons of it flowing through Houston-S Bayou system, slowly draining toward the Gulf. It would take days, maybe weeks, for it to fully recede. James called at 5 in the afternoon. Sarah had 4% battery left. "Love, I think I found a route to you. I'll leave here in an hour. Should get there around midnight if there are no blockages." "Great, I'll keep the phone off until then to save battery." Sarah, "About Brian. I talked to my parents." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. James's parents, Roger and Linda Mitchell, lived in Phoenix. Did they know about Brian and the money? "What did you tell them?" "The truth. They were devastated." My mom cried. "My dad said he always knew Brian would end up doing something like this." "Will they help? Financially?" James hesitated. "They want to, but they're retired, living on a fixed income. They can probably contribute $3,000 or $4,000. No more. $3,000 or $4,000. Better than nothing, but still leaving Dorothy with less than half of her original savings." "Okay. Thank them for me, Sarah. We're going to get through this." Somehow I know, but she didn't know. Not really. All Sarah knew was that trust, once broken, was like fine porcelain. You could glue the pieces back together, but you'd always see the cracks. She turned off the phone and stared at the dark screen. 4%. When James arrived, she could finally charge her phone in his car. Finally check full news reports, see photos of the damage, maybe even find information about their house. Dorothy sat beside her on the mat, flipping through an old magazine someone had left. She wasn't really reading, just turning pages, looking at images without really seeing them. "Mom," Sarah said softly, "James is coming to pick us up." "James? Who's James?" Sarah's heart sank. My husband, your son-in-law, remember him? Dorothy frowned, thinking hard. Your husband? Yes, the tall man. Yes, he's tall. He's handsome. You were lucky. Yes, I was, Mom. Except in that moment, Sarah didn't feel lucky. She felt exhausted, betrayed, and deeply worried about the future. But she forced a smile for Dorothy, because what else could she do? The hours dragged. 6 p.m., 7, 8. The gym grew quieter as children fell asleep, and conversations faded to murmurs. Sarah kept her phone off, saving those last precious 4%. At 11:43 p.m., she turned it on briefly. 3% now. A message from James, 20 minutes away. Sarah gently woke Dorothy. Mom, we need to go. James is here. They gathered their few belongings and walked outside. The night was clear for the first time in days. Stars visible through breaks in the clouds. The air still smelled of damp earth, but it lacked that oppressive sense of an imminent storm. Sarah's CRV was still where she had left it, coated in dried silt. She helped Dorothy inside, and they waited. 15 minutes later, headlights crossed the parking lot. James's F-150 mud up to the windows, but running. He jumped out and hugged Sarah so tightly she couldn't breathe for a moment. Thank God you're safe. Thank God we're safe. Just very tired. James hugged Dorothy too, who looked at him with uncertain recognition. You're Sarah's husband. Yes, Dorothy. It's me, James. Oh good, she needs someone to take care of her. James looked at Sarah over Dorothy's head, his eyes showing pain. He saw how far the dementia had advanced, how much Dorothy had lost in just a few days of stress and displacement. I'll always take care of her, he said softly. I promise. They decided to leave Sarah's CRV in the school parking lot for now. James would check her engine in the daylight. For the moment, they would drive together in his truck, looking for an open hotel where they could actually sleep in a bed. They found a Holiday Inn Express on Highway 59, on Houston's north side, far from the flooded areas. They had exactly 2 vacant rooms. James paid with the credit card, more debt piling up, but necessary, and they went up to the 3rd floor. The room was basic but wonderful. 2 queen beds, a bathroom with hot water, reliable electricity. Sarah plugged in her phone and watched the numbers slowly climb. 5%, 10, 15. Dorothy was in the bathroom, and Sarah heard the shower start. James sat on the edge of one bed, his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. For my brother. For not being there. For Sarah sat beside him. It's not your fault. He's my brother. I defended him. Always defended him. And he made a choice. Not you. But I feel like I should have seen it. Should have known he was capable of this. Sarah didn't answer because she didn't know what to say. Should she have seen it too? The signs were all there, the constant unemployment, the repeated requests for loans, the evasive way he talked about his finances. But you want to believe the best in people, especially family. You want to believe that when they say they need help, they really need it, not just taking advantage. What do we do now? James asked. Now, we shower, sleep, and tomorrow find out if we still have a house. And the money? I don't know. We'll figure that out too. But Sarah already knew that recovering the money was unlikely. They could sue Brian. Sure. They might even win a judgment against him. But enforcing that judgment, actually recovering money from someone with no assets and a history of dodging responsibility, that could take years. And in the meantime, Dorothy would grow older, her needs would increase, and they would have to find a way to cover the gap. Dorothy came out of the bathroom wearing the hotel robe, her white hair wet and brushed back. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished. Is there another bed? She asked. Yes, Mom, right here. Sarah helped her settle in, pulling the sheets over her. Good night, dear. Good night, Mom. Sarah took her own shower, standing under the hot water for a long time, letting it wash away days of stress and sweat and fear. When she came out, James was looking at his phone, his face lit by the blue glow. What? Sarah asked. Brian sent a message. He wants to talk. About what? The money he stole. The empty apologies. He says he feels terrible, that he wants to find a way to pay it back. Sarah felt anger boil up. Tell him it's too late to feel terrible. Tell him that when he chose to steal from an elderly woman with dementia during a natural disaster, he lost the right to ask for understanding. James looked at her, surprised by the coldness in her voice. Should I tell him that? No, I'll tell him myself. Sarah grabbed James's phone and typed a message to Brian. Her fingers flew across the keys. Years of carefully suppressed anger, finally finding release. Brian, you didn't just steal money. You stole your mother-in-law's security. You stole her peace of mind. You stole her ability to age with dignity. All because you are too much of a coward to face your own choices. Don't text me about feeling terrible. If you truly feel terrible, find a way to return every cent. Until then, you are dead to this family. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. James read over her shoulder and nodded slowly. I think he needed to hear that. He needs more than to hear it. He needs real consequences. But let's be honest, he probably never will. People like Brian never do. They lay together in the other bed, Dorothy already softly snoring in hers. Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, feeling the soft bed beneath her. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow they would return to Kingwood and see what was left of their home, their neighborhood, their normal life. Tomorrow they would begin the long process of cleaning, rebuilding, moving forward. But that night, in that anonymous hotel room, Sarah allowed herself to feel everything she had been holding back: the anger, the fear, the betrayal, the exhaustion. Silent tears slid down her face, and James held her, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. Sometimes the water came from the sky. Sometimes it came from people who were supposed to love you, flooding your life with betrayal until you drowned in disappointment. And sometimes, Sarah thought as she finally drifted to sleep, you just had to learn to swim. Friday morning brought an absurdly blue sky, as if the storm had never happened. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains, disoriented for a moment about where she was. Then it all came back: the flood, Brian, the shelter, the escape to this hotel. She checked her phone. 7:23 a.m. James was still asleep beside her, an arm flung across his eyes. In the other bed, Dorothy sat upright, looking around confused. "Good morning, Mom," Sarah whispered, climbing out of bed and going to her. "Where are we?" Dorothy asked, her voice frightened. "In a hotel, remember? There was a flood. We had to leave the house." "Flood?" Dorothy looked out the window, seeing the clear sky. "It's not raining. No, it stopped. But the water's still there. We'll check the house today." They ate the hotel's continental breakfast: lukewarm scrambled eggs, rubbery bacon, boxed cereal. Dorothy ate little, mostly pushing food around her plate. Sarah noticed her mother was growing thinner, her shoulders more pronounced under her blouse. The stress of evacuation had taken its toll. By 9 a.m., they were back in James's truck, driving toward Kingwood. The main roads were open now, though many side streets remained blocked with barricades and road-flooded signs. As they neared their neighborhood, the evidence of disaster became impossible to ignore. Waterlogged furniture piled on lawn sofas, mattresses, dressers, all swollen and stained. Rolled-up carpets like dead snakes, rusted appliances, torn-out drywall stacked in white heaps glinting in the sun. The air carried that smell of mold and rot Sarah recognized from past floods, but never this strong, this pervasive. People worked on their homes dragging debris, running industrial dehumidifiers, ripping out ruined carpet. Some wore masks. Many looked dazed, moving with the automatic gestures of people in shock. When they turned onto their street, Sarah's stomach tightened. The water had receded, leaving behind a thick layer of brown silt covering everything. Abandoned cars sat where they'd been left, now at odd angles, their windows dark with sediment. Trees had toppled, roots exposed like torn nerves. The Mitchell house sat at the top of their property, and as they drew closer, Sarah saw with relief that the first floor looked intact. The water line on the brick wall showed the water had risen about 18 inches up the exterior wall but hadn't entered the door. "Thank God," James murmured, pulling into the driveway. They got out. Sarah helped Dorothy down carefully, making sure she didn't slip in the muck. The lawn, once green and manicured, was now a uniform brown, coated in cracking silt. Branches, trash, and random objects littered the Yada soccer ball. A piece of fence, what looked like part of someone's mailbox. James opened the front door. Inside the house was dark and stuffy, but dry. They had been lucky just a few more inches of water, and it would have been a completely different story. Sarah walked through the house, checking each room. Everything as they'd left it, except darker, cooler, still no power. "I'll flip the breakers," James said. "See if we've got electricity." 2 minutes later, the lights flickered. The fridge hummed to life. The air conditioner started its cycle. Power was back. Sarah felt such a wave of relief she had to sit down. Dorothy wandered the living room, touching things: the sofas, armrest, the side table. The curtains asked if checking they were real. "Are we home?" she asked. "Yes, Mom, we're home." "Good. I want my purse. The brown one." Sarah sighed. "I'll look for it, Mom, I promise. But first, more urgent tasks." James started inspecting outside the foundation, the drainage gutter, the roof. Sarah began inventorying inside damage. The fridge was spoiled everything. Inside had rotted during the 3 days without power. The smell when she opened it was suffocating. She began clearing it out, tossing sour milk, rotten meat, wilted vegetables into garbage bags. Dorothy trailed Sarah through the house, agitated and aimless, asking the same question every few minutes. "Did you find my purse?" On the 5th time, Sarah finally stopped. "Mom? Describe the purse to me. Where did you used to keep it?" Dorothy frowned, thinking hard. "It's brown, leather, with a gold clasp. Fred gave it to me." "Where did you keep it? In the in the..." Dorothy looked around, confused. "I don't remember." "That's okay. I'll look. Why don't you sit and watch TV for a while?" Sarah turned on the television and set it to a news channel. Dorothy sat, but wasn't really watching, just staring blankly at flood footage: helicopters over submerged areas, people rescued from rooftops, the governor making statements. Sarah went into Dorothy's bedroom to search. Checked the closet, nothing but clothes. The dresser, underwear, socks, a few worthless trinkets. Under the bed, just dust. She expanded her search. The master bedroom, James's office area, The hall closet? Nothing, no brown leather purse with a gold clasp. Either it didn't exist, a product of dementia's failing memory, or it had been lost long ago, and Dorothy was only remembering it now. Sarah was about to give up when she opened a hallway cabinet and saw on the top shelf a box labeled Photos, Mom. She pulled it down and opened it. Inside were photo albums, old documents, and at the bottom a brown leather purse with a gold clasp. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She pulled it out. Old, cracked, faded leather, the clasp tarnished. Sarah opened it and looked inside. A ring, simple, gold, clearly well worn, a small black and white photo of Dorothy and Fred on their wedding day, both grinning, young, full of future. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Sarah carefully opened it. A letter handwritten in Fred's script. "My dearest Dorothy, 25 years together today. 25 years of joy, challenges, love, and growth. You've made every day better simply by being in it. This ring was my grandmother's. I want you to have it, not to replace your wedding ring, but as a reminder that our love is intergenerational, enduring, eternal. With all my love always, Fred." Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. She had judged Dorothy, thought the purse was imaginary, another illusion of dementia, but it was real. And what was inside was priceless, not monetarily, but emotionally. Anchors that kept Dorothy connected to a life she was slowly forgetting. Sarah carried the purse into the living room. Dorothy was still sitting on the couch, but her eyes lit up when she saw what Sarah held. "You found it?" "I did, Mom. It was stored safely." Dorothy took the purse with trembling hands, opening it and looking inside. She pulled out the photo, touching the faces with a gentle finger. "We were so young," she whispered. You were beautiful." Dorothy held the photo against her chest, closing her eyes. For a moment, the stress, confusion, fear all disappeared from her face. She was just at peace, holding a piece of memory that still meant something. Sarah sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her mother's shoulders. They stayed like that for a long time, watching the news without really seeing it, each lost in her own thoughts. James came in, wiping dirty hands on a rag. "The foundation looks good. No cracks I can see. The AC might need service. It was submerged halfway, but overall, we got lucky." "Lucky," Sarah repeated, the word strange on her tongue. They had lost $23,000, been evacuated, spent days in a shelter, but compared to their neighbors, the Chens whose house had water up to the second floor, the Williamses 2 houses down whose entire first floor would need rebuilding, yes, she supposed they were lucky. James noticed the purse on Dorothy's lap. "What's that?" "Her purse. The one she was looking for. I found it in the cabinet." He knelt in front of Dorothy. "I'm glad you have it back, Dorothy." She looked at him, and for a moment her eyes were clear, focused. "Thank you for taking care of my Sarah," she said. "She's my only daughter, you know, my treasure." "I know. She's my treasure too." Dorothy smiled and looked back at the photo in her hands. The rest of the day was spent in exhausting work. Sarah cleaned, James fixed the exterior, and Dorothy wandered the house with her brown purse, occasionally stopping to check its contents as if making sure everything was still there. At 4 in the afternoon, Sarah's phone rang. "Unknown number," she answered cautiously. "Hello, Sarah Mitchell. This is Detective Marco Santos, Houston Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit." Sarah's heart raced. "Yes, that's me. I'm calling about a report of bank fraud involving Dorothy Mitchell." "Did you make that report?" Not officially. I called the bank about unauthorized access to the account, but they said since the person was an authorized user, it wasn't technically fraud." "I understand. Well, the bank forwarded the case to us anyway. When significant amounts are involved and the circumstances are suspicious, they usually do." "May I ask you some questions?" Sarah sat down, her heart pounding. Of course, in the next 20 minutes, she told Detective Santos everything: how she had given Brian access during the emergency, how he had systematically transferred $23,000 within a few hours, how he had fled the city. Santos asked specific questions, taking notes. "This Dorothy Mitchell, does she have the mental capacity to manage her own finances?" "No. She has dementia. I have power of attorney." And Brian Mitchell knew that. "Yes, everyone knows. He even used that as an excuse, said she had asked him for help with payments because she was forgetful. But she didn't ask for help, did she?" "No, at least not that I know of. And even if she did, certainly not to transfer all her money into his account." Santos was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'll be honest with you, this is a tough case. Technically, he had authorization to access the account, but context matters. Taking advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman with cognitive impairment during a natural disaster, that could constitute elder exploitation, which is a crime under Texas law." Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. "So you can do something. I can investigate. I'll need documentation, bank records, evidence of your mother's dementia. Any communication between you and Brian? Gather all that and send it to me. I can't promise results, but I'll do my best." "Thank you. Thank you so much. One more thing, where is Brian Mitchell now?" "My husband spoke to him yesterday. He said he was in San Antonio, but we don't know the exact address." I'll see what I can find out. Contact me if he reaches out again." When Sarah hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt since it all began. Not exactly hope, but possibility. Maybe there would be consequences for Brian after all. Maybe there would be justice. She told James, who was optimistic for the first time in days. "We'll cooperate fully. We'll give them everything they need." That night, after Dorothy was in bed, Sarah and James sat at the kitchen table and began gathering documents. Bank statements showing all the transfers, Dorothy's medical diagnosis from the neurology clinic, power of attorney documents, text messages between Sarah and Brian, messages between James and Brian where he admitted taking the money. It was nearly 11 at night when they finished. Sarah sent everything to Detective Santos's email with a cover letter detailing the timeline. "Now we wait," James said. "Now we wait." The weekend passed in a blur of cleaning and recovery. Neighbors began returning, assessing damage, starting the long process of rebuilding. Sarah and James helped the Chens remove soaked drywall. The Kingwood community pulled together the way communities do, after disasters, sharing tools, offering labor, providing meals for those whose kitchens were unusable. But beneath all the camaraderie and resilience, there was an undercurrent of loss. Not just material loss, though there was plenty of that, but loss of security, of normalcy, of the belief that their homes were safe sanctuaries against the world. Sarah saw it in people's faces. The young mother who began to cry every time it rained. The elderly man who compulsively checked the weather forecast every hour. The teenage girl who refused to sleep on the first floor, insisting on dragging her mattress upstairs every night. The trauma didn't come only from the water, but from the helplessness of watching it rise, from the terrible certainty that it could happen again. On Monday, Sarah returned to work at the bank. The branch was open, but running with reduced staffs. Several employees were still dealing with their own flood crises. Her manager, Robert, greeted her with a hug. "Sarah, thank God you're safe. How's your house?" "It survived. Barely, but it survived, and my family is safe. That's what matters." But was it? Sarah wanted to believe that, but she couldn't stop thinking about the money. $23,000. It was digits on Dorothy's balance sheet, but in reality it was years of security, months of care, dignity in old age. At lunch, Sarah checked her email. There was a response from Detective Santos. "Received your documentation. Initiating formal investigation. Located Brian Mitchell in San Antonio. Local officers will make contact soon for interview. We'll keep you updated." Sarah showed James via text message. His response? Finally, he's going to face what he did. But Sarah wasn't so sure. The criminal justice system was slow, especially for financial crimes. Even if Brian was charged, even if he was convicted, restitution could take years. And in the meantime, Dorothy was aging. That night, Sarah sat with calculator and paper, budgeting. With the $24,000 left in Dorothy's savings, plus the $3,000 James's parents had promised, they had $27,000. Quality assisted living care cost about $5,000 per month. That gave Dorothy about 5 months. Unless Sarah and James contributed, she calculated quickly. If they cut non-essential spending, no vacations, no eating out, postponing the kitchen renovation, they could contribute maybe $1,500 per month. That stretched the money to 8 months. And after that, Medicaid, presumably. But Medicaid only covered basic facilities, and waitlists were long. Sarah had visited some Medicaid-funded facilities during her research. Some were acceptable, others were depressing. Rooms that smelled of urine and disinfectant, overworked staff who barely had time for basic human interaction, residents sitting in wheelchairs in hallways, staring into nothing. She didn't want that for Dorothy. Nobody wanted that for someone they loved. Sarah crumpled the paper in frustration and tossed it in the trash. Numbers didn't change realities. No matter how she calculated, Brian had stolen more than money. He had stolen choices, options, dignity. On Tuesday, Dorothy had a bad day. She woke up not recognizing where she was, convinced there were intruders in the house. Sarah spent an hour calming her, explaining repeatedly that they were safe, that it was her home, that there was no danger. But Dorothy couldn't be convinced. She locked herself in the bathroom, refusing to come out. Sarah eventually had to remove the door hinges. She found Dorothy crouched by the tub, crying. "They're going to hurt me," she sobbed. "The bad men. They want to hurt me. There are no bad men. Mom, it's just me, Sarah, your daughter, Sarah." Dorothy looked at her, confused. "You're not Sarah. Sarah is a little girl. Who are you?" Sarah's heart broke. "I grew up, Mom. I'm an adult now, but I'm still your Sarah." It took another half hour to calm Dorothy enough to leave the bathroom. Sarah gave her an Ativan emergency medication prescribed for moments exactly like this. Within 20 minutes, Dorothy was calm, though groggy. Sarah sat beside her on the couch, holding her hand, and realized with terrible clarity that time was running out. The dementia was advancing faster than they expected. Soon, very soon, Dorothy would need full-time care. Not in months, but perhaps in weeks. She called James at work. "We need to talk. About your mother. Tonight, is everything okay?" "No, nothing's okay." That night, after Dorothy was asleep, Sarah and James had the conversation they had been avoiding. The conversation about nursing homes, about costs, about how Brian's betrayal had forced decisions they weren't ready for. I could take a loan against my 401k, James suggested. That would give us more capital and ruin our own retirement. But what else can we do? Sarah had no answer. She only knew that all the options were bad, and each of them existed because one man had decided his own comfort mattered more than someone else's vulnerability. On Wednesday, Detective Santos called Mrs. Mitchell. "We have an update." Brian Mitchell was interviewed by San Antonio police. He admitted taking the money, but claims it was an emergency loan and that he intended to pay it back. "That's a lie. We believe so. Based on the evidence, the speed of the transfers, the total amount, the context of your mother's vulnerability we're seeking, charges for financial exploitation of the elderly." Sarah felt relief wash over her. "Thank you. Truly, thank you. There's something you should know, though even if he's charged and convicted, restitution may take years. The system is slow, and if he has no assets, I understand, but at least there will be consequences. At least there will be justice, even if imperfect." Imperfect justice. It seemed to define everything about this situation. That night, Sarah sat on the front porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The neighborhoods still bore scars from the flood piles of debris on lawns, water lines on houses, streets stained with dried sediment. But people were rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, they were rebuilding. Dorothy appeared at the door, clutching her brown purse. "Can I sit with you?" "Of course, Mom." They sat together on the porch swing, rocking gently. Dorothy opened the purse and pulled out the photo of her and Fred. "Do you know who these people are?" she asked. Sarah looked at the photo. "Tell me about them." "This is Dorothy. And this is Fred. They loved each other very much. They had a good life together. Looks like they did. Sometimes I feel like I know them, but I can't remember how." Sarah took her mother's hand. "It's okay not to remember. The important thing is that their love was real, and it's still real, even if the memory fades." Dorothy looked at her with eyes that carried decades of life she was slowly losing. "You're kind. What's your name?" "Sarah." "That's a pretty name, like my daughter. She was my treasure, you know?" "I'm sure she knew that. I'm sure she loved you very much." "I hope so. I hope I was a good mother." "You were," Sarah said, tears now streaming freely. "You were the best mother." They sat on the porch swing as night fell. A mother who was forgetting and a daughter who would never forget. Bound by love that transcended memory, endured betrayal, and persisted even when everything else had been washed away. The water had risen and receded, leaving scars that would take years to fully heal. But they had survived. Hurt, poorer, forced into impossible choices by another man's cruelty. But still here, still together, still holding on to the pieces of dignity and love that remained. And sometimes, Sarah thought, as the last glow of the sun slipped below the horizon, that had to be enough. 3 weeks after the waters receded, Houston began to remember itself again, though with scars. The Texas summer had arrived in full force, the relentless sun drying the remaining muck into clay-hard cracks. In the Kingwood neighborhood, the work of rebuilding continued. Construction trucks filled streets, the sound of saws and hammers created a constant symphony of renewal. The Mitchell house had regained some appearance of normalcy. The power worked perfectly. The refrigerator had been replaced. The lawn, though still brown-streaked, had begun to show green patches where James had replanted grass. But normalcy was superficial. Beneath it, everything had changed. Sarah was in the kitchen one Saturday afternoon, making iced tea when her phone rang. "Detective Santos." "Mrs. Mitchell, I have an update." Sarah set down the glass she was holding, her heart racing. "I'm listening." "The grand jury has indicted Brian Mitchell for financial exploitation of an elderly adult, a third-degree felony in Texas. Bail was set at $50,000. Is he going to jail? Depends if he can post bail or not. If not, yes, he'll remain detained until trial. If he can, he'll be released under certain conditions." Sarah closed her eyes. "And restitution? That will be part of the sentencing process if he's convicted. But Mrs. Mitchell, I need to manage your expectations. Even with a conviction, recovering the full money may take years. It may never happen if he has no assets. I understand, but at least there are consequences. Yes, at least there's that." After she hung up, Sarah stood in the kitchen for a long time, processing. Brian would be held accountable. The law had recognized what he did as a crime, not just a family dispute. It was something, even if it wasn't enough. James found her there, staring out the window at the backyard where Dorothy sat in a lawn chair, rummaging through her brown purse. "Was that the detective?" he asked. Sarah nodded and told him about the indictment. James leaned against the counter, relief and anger battling in his expression. "My brother's going to jail. He might. If he can't post bail, well, he won't be able to. He spent all the money. Remember." Sarah took his hand. "I know this is hard. He's your brother. He stopped being my brother when he stole from a defenseless woman. When he put our future, my mother's future, at risk for his own greed." James paused, swallowing hard. "You know the hardest part. It's not anger, it's shame. Shame that someone of my blood could do this. It's not your shame to carry, but it feels like it is." They stood together in the kitchen, united in mourning for a family relationship now irreparably broken. No matter what happened with the criminal case, no matter if Brian eventually paid restitution, the trust was destroyed beyond repair. Some damage water could cause, others were permanent. That night, after Dorothy was asleep, Sarah and James had another hard conversation, the one they had been postponing for days. "She can't live alone anymore," Sarah said. "Not even in her own house with me visiting twice a day. She needs constant supervision." "I know. I toured 3 facilities this week." Sarah pulled a folder from her bag. "This is the best one I found that our budget can cover. Meadowbrook Senior Living. It's clean, the staff seem caring, the reviews are good." James flipped through the brochures. "How much? $4,500 a month for memory care? With what's left, we can cover about 6 months. After that, we need to contribute $1,500 monthly. I can do that. I'll take extra shifts, maybe freelance work on weekends." "James, that's not sustainable long term." "Then what's the alternative?" "Medicaid facilities with a 2-year wait list. By then she'd be in advanced stages." "She deserves better, I agree. But we need to be realistic about our own financial limits, especially now, with Brian likely never paying everything back." James rubbed his face with his hands. "How did we get here? How did we go from normal life to making impossible decisions about my mother's care? A storm? And a man who decided his needs mattered more than anything else." They scheduled a tour at Meadowbrook for Monday. Sarah hated the idea of moving Dorothy out of her home, from familiar surroundings to institutional rooms. But the bathroom incident hadn't been isolated. There had been others: Dorothy wandering outside at 3 in the morning, wearing only a nightgown. Dorothy trying to cook and leaving the stove on. Dorothy becoming violently agitated when Sarah tried to bathe her, convinced she was a stranger trying to attack her. The time for half measures had passed. Dorothy needed professional care, no matter how much Sarah wished she could do it all herself. On Monday morning, they took Dorothy to visit Meadowbrook. The facility was near Humble, a 20-minute drive from Kingwood. The building was modern and well kept, surrounded by manicured lawns and flower gardens. Inside, it smelled well. It didn't smell bad, which Sarah considered a victory. The director, an African-American woman named Denise Williams, greeted them warmly. She had that patient, gentle manner that comes from years of working with dementia patients. "Welcome to Meadowbrook. You must be the Mitchell family, and this is Dorothy." Dorothy clutched her brown purse, looking around nervously. "Where are we?" "In a very nice place," Denise said softly. "Would you like a tour?" They walked through the facility of the common living area with a big screen TV and comfortable furniture, the dining room with neatly set tables, the activity room where residents painted and did crafts. The hallways were wide and well lit, decorated with photos from past decade scenes from the 1940s and 50s that dementia residents might recognize from their youth. "We've found that images from their formative eras help keep residents grounded," Denise explained. "It's more comforting for them than modern decor." They saw an available room, private, not shared, with a window overlooking the garden. It had a bed, dresser, armchair, and small bathroom. Functional, but sterile. Sarah tried to imagine Dorothy living there, bringing her few precious belongings to make it home. "Can we bring our own furniture?" Sarah asked. "Of course. Many families bring photographs, favorite chairs, blankets, things that help with the transition." Dorothy touched the bed, her expression distant. "Am I going to sleep here?" Sarah exchanged a glance with James. They hadn't told Dorothy the purpose of the visit. She wouldn't understand. She would only become agitated. "Maybe. Mom, what do you think?" "It's smaller than my room. It is, but it has a nice view." Sarah led her to the window. Outside, cardinals played at a bird feeder. "Birds," Dorothy said, smiling faintly. Fred liked birds. After the tour, Denise took them to her office to discuss logistics, costs, visiting hours, medical protocols, what happens when residents become more combative or attempt to wander. "We have staff trained in de-escalation techniques," Denise assured, "and our garden is securely enclosed. Residents can walk safely without risk of getting lost." Sarah looked at the paperwork, her stomach tightening. Admission forms, medical waivers, do not resuscitate orders. Each document a reminder that they were planning for Dorothy's decline, not improvement. "When are you thinking about admission?" Denise asked. James looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Dorothy through the glass window. She was in the common room, watching other residents play cards, her brown purse on her lap. "Soon," Sarah said, "within 2 weeks. If possible, I can make that happen. We just need the paperwork signed and the first month's payment up front." They left Meadowbrook with a stack of forms and mixed emotions. The facility was good, probably the best they could afford, but it still felt like defeat, surrender to the inevitable. "She's going to hate it at first," James said as they drove back. "People with dementia usually hate change." "I know, but we'll visit her every day. We'll make her room cozy. We'll make it work." Dorothy was quiet in the back seat, looking out the window. Sarah wondered how much she understood, how much she would retain. Tomorrow, she might not remember anything about the visit. Or she might remember only fragments, the sense of discomfort, the fear of the unknown. Back at home, Sarah began the process of filling out forms. medical history, drug allergies, emergency contacts, list of current medications. Each section a testimony to Dorothy's fragility, to the ways her body and mind were failing. When she reached the financial section, Sarah paused. Payment source, private funds, personal savings. She wrote the amount available, $24,000, Dorothy's savings, plus $3,000 family contribution equals $27,000 total. Under normal circumstances, Dorothy would have had $50,000 available. More than a year of paid care, time to evaluate options, to make gradual transitions. But normal circumstances had been washed away, along with everything else. Sarah signed the forms with renewed anger. Each signature, each mark was a reminder that they were in this position because Brian had chosen to steal from a vulnerable woman during a natural disaster. The betrayal seemed to deepen with each passing day. James found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "We'll get through this." How? How do we get through the fact that your brother stole your mother's future? That because of him, she has half the time she should have had in a decent place? I don't know, but I know she has you. And you'll make sure she's cared for, no matter what. Because that's who you are. Sarah leaned into him, letting him hold her as she wept for Dorothy, for themselves, for the injustice of it all. The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah cleared out the guest room where Dorothy had been staying, packing clothes and personal items. She chose carefully family photos in frames, Dorothy's favorite blanket, a comfortable armchair that would fit into the Meadowbrook room, the brown purse, of course, a few photo albums. James installed a small TV in the room. Sarah hung curtains Dorothy had made decades earlier, bringing a piece of home into the institutional space. Slowly, the sterile room began to feel less frightening. Dorothy didn't fully understand what was happening. Sarah tried explaining multiple times, "You're going to a place where people can help you all the time, where you'll be safe," but the words slipped through Dorothy's mind like water through a sieve. On moving day, a sunny April Saturday, Sarah woke with a lead weight in her stomach. Today, she would hand her mother's care over to strangers. Today, she would admit she could no longer do it alone. Dorothy was strangely calm during the drive. She clutched her purse and looked out the window, occasionally commenting on something she saw. "Look, a dog, or the flowers are pretty." At Meadowbrook, Denise met them at the reception desk with a warm smile. "Welcome, Dorothy. We're so glad you came to stay with us." Dorothy looked around, confused. "Stay? I'm not just visiting." Sarah knelt in front of her. "Mom, remember we talked about this? You're going to stay here for a while. It's nice here, and the people are kind. But what about my house? Your house is safe. We'll visit it often. But now you need more help than we can give you at home." Dorothy's face twisted in confusion and rising panic. "No, I don't want to stay. I want to go home. I know, Mom, but this is better. No, you can't make me stay." Dorothy tried to stand, but Sarah gently kept her seated. Denise stepped in, her voice calm and professional. "Dorothy, how about I show you your room? We brought your favorite things. Your photos, your special chair. My photos. Yes, come see with kindness but firmness." Denise guided Dorothy down the hallway. Sarah and James followed, carrying the last boxers. Dorothy's room was in the memory care wing, door with a security code to keep residents safe, to prevent wandering. When Dorothy saw the room set up with her belongings, she softened slightly. "That's my chair." "Yes, it is," Sarah said. "And look, your photos are here on the dresser." Dorothy slowly walked through the small space, touching things: the familiar blanket, her clothes in the closet, the photo album on the nightstand. For a moment, she seemed almost content. Then realization struck again. "I'm staying here, alone." "You won't be alone," Denise said. "We have staff here 24 hours, and your family will visit a lot. But at night I'll be alone." Sarah felt her heart break. "Mom, you'll be safe. I promise." They stayed another 2 hours, helping Dorothy settle in, meeting other residents, joining afternoon activities in the common room. Slowly, Dorothy seemed to calm, the distraction of new things outweighing the fear. When it was finally time to leave, Sarah hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow. Yes, every day if I can. Promise. Promise." But as Sarah and James walked away, she heard Dorothy behind them. "Wait, don't leave me. Please don't leave me here." Her voice grew more desperate. Sarah forced herself to keep walking, tears blinding her vision. Behind them, they heard Denise's calm voice distracting Dorothy. "Dorothy, come see the birds in the garden. Remember how much you like birds." In the car, Sarah completely broke down. James drove in silence, letting her cry, his own jaw tight with restrained emotion. "Did we do the right thing?" Sarah finally asked. "We did the only thing possible, but she was begging us not to leave her." "Sarah, she would have begged in any circumstance. Dementia means she can't fully understand why this is necessary, but we can, and we're doing it because we love her, not despite loving her." Sarah knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. They visited Dorothy every day that first week. Some visits were good. Dorothy recognized Sarah, smiled, seemed content in her new environment. Other visits were painful. Dorothy didn't recognize Sarah, accused her of being a stranger, demanded to know why Fred wasn't coming to pick her up. Slowly, very slowly, Dorothy began to adjust. She struck up a sort of friendship with another resident, a woman named Margaret, who also loved birds. She liked a young aide named Marcus, who had infinite patience and a gentle smile. She developed a routine: breakfast at 8, activities at 10, lunch at noon, a nap, more activities, dinner, TV in the evening. Sarah's life also developed a new routine: work, then a visit to Meadowbrook, then home, dinner, sleep, repeat. Weekends, spent hours with Dorothy, sometimes just sitting in silence while her mother examined her brown purse, taking out and putting back the same items over and over. A month after Dorothy's move, Detective Santos called again. Mrs. Mitchell. Brian Mitchell went to trial. He pled guilty to financial exploitation of an elder. Guilty, he admitted it. Yes. In exchange for the guilty plea, the prosecution agreed to a lighter sentence: 2 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 1 year, plus 5 years of probation. And he must pay restitution of $23,000. Sarah sat down. Will he actually pay it back? It will be tortured, but honestly, Mrs. Mitchell, with his history, expect payments over many years. Maybe $100 to $200 monthly at first. It could take a decade or more to recover everything, but at least there's a court order. At least there's legal recognition that he did something wrong. Exactly. And a criminal record that will follow him for the rest of his life. After hanging up, Sarah told James. He was quiet for a long time. 2 years, he finally said. He ruined my mother's life and gets 2 years. And a criminal record. And restitution that will take a decade to pay. Meanwhile, my mother is in a care facility draining our savings. I know, but it's something. It's consequence. It's more than many people get in situations like this. James nodded slowly. I suppose so. That night, they visited Dorothy. She was having a good day, recognizing them both, joining a bingo game in the common room. When they saw her smiling as Marcus joked about her winning streaks, Sarah felt something shift inside. Yes, Brian had stolen $23,000. He had stolen choices and options. He had forced hard decisions and financial sacrifice. But he had not stolen this Dorothy's moments of joy, her connection with new friends, the care she received from dedicated staff. He had not stolen Sarah's love for her mother, or James's commitment to his family. He had not stolen the capacity to laugh, to find light in darkness, to rebuild on solid ground. The flood was over, the waters had receded, and in the wake of destruction, life went on imperfect, harder, financially strained, but it went on. Sarah and James drove home under a starry sky, windows open, spring air filling the car. Houston was healing, rebuilding, moving forward, as it always did, as it always would. And the Mitchell family, though hurt and betrayed and financially bruised, was doing the same. Because in the end, Sarah realized, it wasn't about stolen money or broken trust. It was about choosing love over bitterness, resilience over defeat, moving forward over giving up. The storm had revealed who Brian truly was, but it had also revealed who Sarah was: someone who showed up, who cared, who protected the people she loved even when it cost her everything. And that, she decided as they pulled into the driveway and saw the house that had survived the flood waiting for them, was the kind of person she wanted to be. The water might rise again. There would be more storms, more challenges, more betrayals. Life guaranteed that. But they had survived this one, and when the next came and they would be ready. Stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been betrayed, more grateful for what they had because they had almost lost everything. Sarah took James's hand as they walked into the house, and in that simple touch was a promise. No matter what storms came, they would face them together. And that, she knew, was all that truly mattered. And so our story ends. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. The Mitchell family's journey shows us that sometimes the worst disasters don't come from nature, but from the people we trust. But it also shows us that we can choose how to respond: with bitterness or with resilience, with defeat or with the determination to rebuild. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear about strength in the midst of life's storms. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced betrayal from someone close? How did you overcome it? Your story might inspire others. Until the next story.